Hello, I am the Story Girl, and welcome to the story of Christine and the Apple of Contentment. If you're wondering what the word contentment means, I'll tell you right now. Contentment means that you feel calm and happy with the world. You feel content. It doesn't mean that you feel really excited and energetic, but you also don't feel gloomy and sad. You feel exactly like you just had everything you needed provided for you and are ready to take a peaceful nap. Once there was a woman who had three daughters, and she liked the eldest daughter the best, for that eldest daughter looked just like her with black eyebrows. She was very also fond of her second daughter, who had one shoulder higher than the other. Yes, she was very fond of these two daughters and lavished upon them the best that money could buy, silken dresses, little cakes, and the very best of finery. There was, of course, three daughters born to this woman, and the youngest was named Christine. The mother didn't care for Christine. Christine didn't look a thing like her. Perhaps you would have liked Christine better if she had crinkled black hair just like she did, or if she had wide, droopy eyes. But Christine had shining golden hair and startlingly blue eyes. What's more, Christine had beautiful skin, and when she sang so that the birds would stop their singing just to hear her. Because of this, she gave Christine the worst of everything, clothes with dirt and patches, and she made sure that Christine always knew that she was the least liked daughter. Punishment for her being so beautiful, she was forced to do all the cooking and cleaning, and on top of all the cooking and cleaning, she had to do all of it on just the scraps of bread that were left over from her own meal with her older two daughters. On top of even that, she had to spend all day, every day, herding the geese to pasture. Well, Christine didn't mind. She took her knitting and mending with her, did her best to make the best of her situation. And so every day she worked her hands to the bone, ate her crust of bread, slept in the little attic space, and took the geese out to pasture. She liked watching the geese. They were funny and made funny sounds, so she would sing while she was with them, gather them back up in the evenings, and herd them back home. One day, she was taking the geese out to pasture, going over a bridge, when she happened to see something hanging on the bridge. It was a hat. It was such a nice hat. It was red and had a little tassel hanging down. She lifted it off the bridge and said, well, finders keepers, and put it inside of her pocket. She herded the geese along to pasture, thinking about what she might do with a fine new red hat, when she heard somebody calling her name. Christine! Christine! She looked up and saw the strangest little man. This little man had a head as big as a cabbage, but with wispy little arms and legs as he struggled along through the pasture. Christine! Christine! Oh, thank goodness I've caught you. You have my hat. Well, Christine wasn't born yesterday. He could be talking about any hat, and so she said, and what hat would that be, sir? Oh, you know well enough what hat. The red hat that was hanging on the bridge. And just how would that hat have come to be there? Well, I took it off while I was fishing, and the fish was so large that it pulled me away into the river, and I just barely got back. But I saw that you had taken it, and so I've come to have it back, please. If I can't have my hat back, I won't be able to go home to my nice little home under the hill. Please, may I have it back? Saying that I had such a hat, what would you give me for it, little man? Oh, yes, indeed, he would give her $10 for it. $10 was $10, but this was such a nice red hat. She didn't know she could take such a small sum for it. Oh, he offered her $100. Yes, well, said Christine, it does have the tassel to be considered as well. Very well, said the old man, and he plunged his hand into his pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a little black bean. This bean I will trade you for my hat, said he. Well, that is very well and good, said Christine, but what is it good for? Ah, Christine, said this man, this little seed will grow into the tree that bears the apple of contentment. And what is that? Said Christine. The apple of contentment will be food and clothing and warmth for anybody who plants the seed with their own hand. But you will be the only person who will be able to pluck the apple from the tree. Wow, seemed like a fine thing to Christine. She took the hat out of her pocket, handed it to the man, took the bean, and the man vanished. Christine herded her geese back home and, before going inside, planted that bean right underneath where her attic window was. Went in and did her usual washing and cooking and dressing, everything that she was usually meant to do, and then went up to bed. When she woke up, she looked out of her window and saw overnight a tall, straight, magnificent tree had grown right outside her window. And growing on this tree was a single apple. Not a regular apple, oh no. This apple shone with a dull golden light, and the skin around it was just as golden. She reached out her hand from her window and plucked the apple as if it had been no more than a gooseberry, and took a bite. Oh, and the apple, the single bite, filled her stomach as though she'd eaten a grand meal, and tasted like the very best of breakfasts. And even though it was quite chilly that morning, she felt like she was wearing a warm winter coat. She didn't feel cold at all, and very cheerfully went about the rest of her work that morning. She looked around, but her mother and sisters didn't appear to be in the house. They had seen the tree as well, and all three of them were standing, staring up at the apple. The apple had grown back the moment Christine had plucked the first one. They stared at the apple as though it was the answer to their every desire, licking their lips and drooling a bit out of their mouths. Daughter, said the mother to her eldest daughter, go up and pluck that apple, will you? Make Christine do it, said the oldest daughter. No, you do it, said the mother. And so the oldest daughter started to climb. She climbed and climbed and climbed and climbed. She seemed to be climbing for a very long time, but she never got any closer to the apple. The tree seemed to be growing and growing and growing, taking the apple further and further away from the sister, till finally she dropped back down. I can't do it, said the oldest sister. Worthless girl. You, said the mother to her middle daughter, you go up and get that apple. Well, this daughter was a bit smarter than her older sister. She went and got a ladder, and she put the ladder up and climbed up and reached and reached and reached. No matter how hard she reached, she couldn't pluck the apple. So the three had to content themselves with staring and staring and staring. Of course, whenever Christine wanted a bite from the apple, all she had to do was reach up her hand and pluck it, as though it were no other than a gooseberry on a bush. It just so happens that the very day that she planted that bean was the day that the king of the land was riding through the countryside, observing the workings of all the farm people and peasants, and he was surrounded by his knights and lords and ladies and chancellors. He saw in the distance a glowing apple. He rode closer to the apple and saw three women standing around it, staring up at it, and he stared at it as well. Oh, I must have that apple, said the king. Steward, he said to a man on a horse to his right, go and get that apple for me. Well, the steward popped down from his horse and ran right up to the tree, and he reached and reached and reached and reached. I've almost got it, he said, but the apple had gotten further and further away the further that he reached for it. Bring it to me at the castle. And the king rode away with his long line of lords and ladies, leaving the steward on his horse. He looked around at the ladies. Pardon me, old woman, he said to the mother. Do one of you own this tree? Why, yes, said the mother. The tree belongs to my daughter, this daughter here, and she pushed forward her eldest daughter. Yes, she is who the tree belongs to. Oh, good, then she'll be able to pluck that apple for the king. The king wants it very much. She could pluck that for me and I'll take it to the king. Oh, no, said the mother. She's shy and doesn't like to climb trees while there are gentlemen present. I'll have her pick the apple and send her along to the castle. Oh, very well, said the steward, and he rode off on his horse. Christine, said the mother. Christine, come here at once. Come here and pluck that apple. Well, Christine didn't like to keep her mother waiting, and so she trotted over to the tree and reached up, plucked the apple as if it were nothing more than a gooseberry, and handed it to her eldest sister. Now, you take this to the king, child, and make sure that you make a good impression. Well, whining and complaining and tramping through the whole countryside, the eldest daughter finally arrived at the castle. She had wrapped the apple up in a napkin. I brought the apple for the king, she said, and she slouched into the castle, into the courtroom. Well, let's see it, said the king. She opened up the napkin, and lying in her hands was no apple, but a ball of mud. That's not an apple, growled the king. Away with her! And she was tossed out of the castle, and she grumbled and tramped all the way back home. Foolish girl. Here, she called to the second daughter. You will take it this time. Christine, we need another apple. Well, Christine liked to be kind to those around her, and so she reached up her hand and plucked the apple, handed it to the second sister, who trotted off very nicely, after wrapping the apple up in a napkin, of course, to the castle. I have the apple for the king, she said, and she was led into the throne room. Here is your apple, your majesty, she said. She unwrapped her cloth, but there was no apple there, only a stone. That is no apple, away with you! And she too was tossed out of the castle. The king turned to his steward and said, Steward, you go back to that tree, and you ask who the tree really belongs to. Yes, your majesty, said the steward, and he rode his horse back to the tree with the apple of contentment. Old woman, I know very well that the tree doesn't belong to you or her or her. Who does it belong to? Well, it belongs to, well, it's just our maid. She's away with the geese at the moment. I'll go find her. So the steward rode off into the pastures, found Christine with the geese, lifted her onto his horse, rode back to the tree, and she plucked the apple as though it were nothing more than a gooseberry on a bush. He rode her all the way back to the castle. She slipped down from the horse, walked right up to the throne, knelt down and said, Your Majesty, here is your apple. Well, the king finally picked up the apple, smelled it and bit into it. The moment he tasted the apple, he looked at the girl who had brought it and saw how beautiful she was, and saw how kind she had been to bring him this apple. Will you marry me? Said the king. Well, of course, Christine said yes, and there was a grand wedding. You probably weren't invited, but the mother and the two sisters were, but they were so full of jealousy that they had rather been dancing on pins and needles than watching Christine dance with the king. Well, no matter, said the mother. At least we have the apple at our home. We could have people pay to come and look at it. But the next day, when the mother gazed out of her window, the tree was gone. But when the new queen looked out of her window at the palace, she saw growing there was the tree with the apple of contentment. And it was a good thing too, because everybody needs a little bite of contentment once in a while. The end. I am the story girl, and I've always enjoyed this story, and I've told it to my sisters many times, but the version that they liked better, almost the exact same story, but it's called One Eyes, Two Eyes, Three Eyes, about a girl who has two eyes, like most humans do, but she has these two sisters. The oldest one has one eye, and the younger one has three eyes. So they always enjoyed that one better, so I'm more experienced telling that one. In this story, Christine uses her choices to bargain for the hat and ends up getting a seed for a tree that benefits her very greatly. Have you ever used your choices to get your best deal out of somebody? Remember, you're the main character of your story. Thank you for joining the story today. See you next time.